All right, so we're moving on to our satin stitch flower, and for our satin stitch flower, I'm going to do the same thing as I did for our leaf stitch. I'm going to demonstrate it in 3 and 6 strands just because they do look so different, and we do sometimes tend to use a little bit of a different technique. This is going to be 6 strands on some very small petals. Again, 6 strands on a huge leaf is going to, or petal is going to look very different than 6 strands on a tiny one, and 3 strands on a tiny one is going to look very different on a big one. But it just gives you an idea of the variance between 3 similar objects, how 3, 6, and 4 look. For this petal, I start in the center and I do 1 stitch down the center, which is still the same way I do a regular satin stitch. But because the base of our satin stitch doesn't have much more room to put stitches, and we have to fill in this top part, we have to put more stitches here than down here. So we need to shorten some of our stitches. So our first stitch is going to go like this. And then our second stitch on each side of our first stitch is going to go just a little bit further up from the base. So you're filling in the top, but you're not coming all the way down to your bottom spot. And I call this like, you don't want to create a traffic jam. So essentially you're trying to put a bunch of stitches into a spot that doesn't have the room for it, creating kind of like a traffic jam of stitches. So those 2 are short ones. Just caught the thread from the end of my knot. There we go. And then this one, I'm going to do a longer one. And whether you do 1 short to 1 long, or you do 3 short and 1 long, is all going to depend on the size of your flower. So this one's very small. We're not doing as many stitches. I can probably fit 3 longer stitches in there at the bottom. You kind of have to guesstimate. I've got about 3. And then I'm going to do probably about 5 to 7 stitches this whole pattern. So, or sorry, that's not right. I've already done 5. So we're filling in that top part, and I'm doing the short stitch again. And when I'm doing that short stitch, I'm actually tucking it in behind the other ones to hide that it stops short of the others. Because again, the bottom part of this shape is already filled in. It's done. I don't need any more stitches down there. So I am just laying them underneath. And because they're tucked underneath, it looks like you can't, or it looks like it's gone all the way to the bottom. It looks like they're all blending in. And you can't really see where that one ends and that one starts. So if you can, as you can see, it's kind of, you can't see where that is. And you can, I might keep going. I have a little bit, I can still see some black over here. I'm gonna do like a tiny stitch, tucks again in behind. Because what happens if you have too many stitches attempting to go into this little spot in the bottom, you're gonna end up with a big lump. And sometimes you still end up with not as even of a, like you end up with a little bit of extra, like it ends up being misshapen. Well, misshapen's not maybe the right word, but it ends up a little bit more full down here than it does up here. If that's the case, if you're still getting this kind of bump right here, you need to shorten up the short stitches so that they're ending closer to the top. So you just are going to work your way around and do all the petals practicing that technique. And you can try different techniques. You can try doing your first stitch as a long one, then doing 2 short stitches. And when you're going to do 2 short stitches, so the first short stitch I would do would be my shortest, tucking it in behind. Okay, and then my second short stitch, the goal with having this one be a little longer is that you tuck it in behind and that the length of that one covers the end of the other one, right? So it's covering where that one has stopped. So let's do that. Maybe 3 of those. So we've done 1, that one covered, and then this one's going to cover that second short stitch and hopefully cover the end of it. And then this last one is going to go all the way to the bottom, meeting up in the center. And as you can see, you cannot tell that half of those stitches are short. And then this one I'm going to tuck in behind again, about halfway down. And then this one I'm going to go almost all the way to the bottom, just beside. And it's done. And that one actually almost worked out even better than the first one by doing even more dramatic short and long. So we can do the same on this side. We'll tuck in our shortest stitch. Okay, at the top. And then our next one is going to be a little longer. Tuck it in there. Next one's going to go almost all the way down. And then this one's going to go straight down into the center, making it one of my longer ones. Sorry, that's my puppy. And then let's see if we can get it up. Okay, I'm trying to come up without coming up through. There we go. So I want to, right there you could see that I was trying to come up from the back of the fabric. Sorry, he's trying to sit underneath my desk. Oh, but he's on top of a plastic bag. So I'm trying to come up from the back of the fabric, but I'm coming up through my other strands, which is not what you want. So I was trying to pull those strands back so that I could get up nice and close so they don't have a gap. Okay, and then where I'm coming down is just right behind. So I think we've got a pretty good gauge on how those ones work. Now we're going to do 6 strands, which is going to be very interesting on these tiny petals. All right, so we're working with 6 strands. And I'm just going to start on this top petal here. And it's the exact same technique. So we're going to do 1 stitch straight down the middle. As you can see, one 6-inch 6-strand stitch down the center of that. It's taken up quite a bit of our pattern. So for our next stitch, I'm going to do my short stitch. For this one, I'm going to literally do 1 short, 1 long, and I'm probably going to be done after about, I'm going to guess I'm going to get 7 stitches out of this whole thing. Okay, so I'm doing a really short one, kind of like we saw in the second petal of my 3 strands. We did the shorter ones and it was a little better. Okay, and then another long one. We're almost as long. It's just so close to being down to the very center that you can't even tell that I didn't go quite. I'm just right behind my first stitch. Okay. And then I'm literally going to get 1 more stitch in here. Maybe. Yes. And I'm going to tuck it in behind because it's going to be a nice short one just to curve out the edge of the petal. This side I almost look like I might get 2 stitches. I'm not sure. Okay, so we're tucking it in behind. I think I might get 2. Yeah, looks like it needs 1 more to round it out. And that's normal. Sometimes your satin stitch flower, you'll have more stitches on one side than you will on the other. The flowers aren't identical. So that one is done, and it ended up being a nice little rounder. It's a little rounder than the shape that was drawn, and that's okay. And then we'll do this one. It's a nice narrow long one. So one straight long stitch. And why would anyone do 6 strands on a tiny flower like this? Well, it's for the look of it. So if you're looking up at that leaf there, you can see like it's got a nice 3D effect. It's fuller than the 3 strands. It's got some texture. It almost looks like it's popping off of the page. And that's the same thing with these little flowers. They almost look like they're coming off the page. And that's what a lot of people are trying to achieve when they do 6 strands, is they're trying to create that texture. Okay, so we get the gist of how this is going to go. I think I probably would put one more stitch on each side, just a little one tucked behind, but I ran out of thread. So you can see sort of what I'm saying when I'm talking about like the texture. You can see these ones are flatter. They're a little bit more blended. The strands aren't as obvious. They blend together a little bit more. That's the goal. The less strands, the more fine detail you're going to get. The more strands you use, did I say less strands you use, the more fine detail you're going to get. The more strands you're going to use, the more 3D. If you looked at this from the side, this is going to be about double the thickness of this one. Same with this here. It's not maybe double because I did do a lot less stitches, but it is. It's going to be wider off the fabric. So again, if you're stitching something where you want it to be durable, like you're stitching a pillow and people are going to be laying on it, you might not want to use 6 strands for any of it, because you might end up with something that's getting snagged on stuff. The less strands you use, the flatter to your fabric it's going to be. And I think you get the ability with 1 strand, 2 strand, 3 strands, a little bit easier to blend things if you want to use multiple colors. 6 strands creates a more abstract, like this is the generic shape, it's full, it's not necessarily as detailed, if that's helping you see the difference between why we would choose 6 strands versus 3 strands. And then size, obviously, if you're the bigger you're working, and time. How long do you want to take to do it?